Hey, welcome to another WLRN live stream. I'm Thistle Pettersen reporting from WLRN Studios, and I have a co-host today, Emily, and we are going to be speaking with Elizabeth Chesak, who is a woman who presented at Sisters for Sisters in Madison last year in the spring about her life experience with identifying as trans. She identified as trans from 2012 until 2019, and now has joined the feminist movement and has a lot to say about what happened to her and what it means. And so welcome to our live stream. Emily, do you have anything to say before we...
Just excited to chat with two rad women today.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so hey, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your experiences with us. I mean, this is a very personal topic, I think, for women, but we were chatting before we went on camera about having a sense of humor, and I think that really kind of distinguishes you in a way when we're looking at transitioning and detransitioning and just the heaviness of it, you know, and the seriousness of it all the time. And I just find that your playful nature is really refreshing and really needed. And especially around this subject, you know, I mean, that's something I've been noticing is that the trans activists just don't have a sense of humor. They're just so offended so easily, and they find woman, adult, human, female to be like, oh, this horrible hate speech. And I mean, literally the news media outlets in Madison, mainstream news media outlets, and the alternative media outlets are reporting that adult, human, female is a dog whistle for hate speech and for hatred of trans women, you know, because it's all about trans women. That's what feminism is supposed to be.
The hate speech is saying that men can't be women.
Right. So let's dive into the subject at hand. And can you just talk about like when you first discovered trans and what it meant to you when you discovered it?
I think it was not very long before I started questioning my own gender identity, which tracks for a lot of people. Like, we hear of it and then we realize, oh, it's been me all along, which now I think seems really sketchy. Like, oh, you never worried about this the rest of your life, but then you find out about it and like 2 months later you think it's you. So I would have to say that was no earlier than 2011, but I think it was 2012, which was, I was on this writing website, National Novel Writing Month, actually, the young people's version. And we had this giant forum, and there were just all these girls who identified as trans. Did my screen disappear?
No, you're there.
See you.
We see you.
We see you. We hear you.
Okay, well, now I can't see it. Why can't I see it?
No.
Sorry, a call came through.
That's okay.
Oh.
Oh, no. Okay. Sorry. I'm just trying to figure out how to move it back so that I can see you guys.
No worries. Take a minute and figure it out.
So while she's figuring that out, let me just say that this is a live stream, and then later we're going to edit out things like this and have just the best parts in our podcast, which is what we do here at WLRN. Every month we handcraft and stitch together interviews, commentary, music clips, and create a podcast that's collectively created by women.
There we go.
And there she's back. All right, sister.
I'm sorry about that.
So you were talking about in 2012 that you went, where was it that you went and you were with other girls that identified as trans?
Yeah, it was the National Novel Writing Month project.
Novel writing. So what does novel writing have to do with being trans?
There was just this giant forum, and we could all post about, our writing projects or just life. And there were a bunch of girls who are identifying as trans boys or non-binary. And I just remember just sitting there. It would have been November 2012, just sitting there in front of my laptop at home thinking, is the reason that I'm attracted to girls, does that mean I was born in the wrong body? And it just kind of snowballed from there.
Had you been exposed to the idea prior to that experience? Like, had I Am Jazz hadn't come out at that early, that's 2012.
I don't think so, no.
Yeah, so that was the very first time you became aware of this thing called trans.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. And it made you wonder about yourself because these other girls were doing it. And girls, I mean, humans are very social. We learn from each other. Our peers are our role models, and we influence each other a lot. And so if your peers are doing this and identifying as trans, there's going to be, some peer pressure. Maybe, I don't know if that's the...
Sorry, I didn't mean to
Go ahead.
But I was saying, we were just listening to your speech at Sisters for Sisters, and what you talked about in that, which I really resonated with me in my experience, is how once this ideology gets in, it's not cool. It's not okay to be cis or straight, because that means you're an oppressor, and it's not cool. You are a bad person all of a sudden in that group. That's what happened in the theater company that I was working in when the trans got slipped in there, that all of a sudden, it was oh, well, there's the cis people and they need to sit in the corner and be quiet. And then there's the trans people and they should always be front and center. Mm-hmm. And so of course, if you're in an environment where that's what everybody else is saying, it's oh, well, I'm not cis.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So trans is painted as the victim underdog of cis oppression. And so if you don't identify as trans or non-binary or some kind of gender identity, then you are the oppressor.
Mm-hmm. It's actually something I'm wanting to talk about at 2 upcoming conferences I'm speaking at. This whole idea that unfortunately, victimhood is currency, and people don't want to be the oppressor, and they get attention paid to them if they identify as trans.
Yeah.
And I feel like we talk a lot about, they're autistic or they're traumatized or they're gay, and that's why they identify as trans, and those things are true, but also, unfortunately, sometimes it's just wanting attention and wanting to be heard. Mm-hmm. And I think the sense that the bigger victim you are, the more people will listen to you. Because having had these very intense friendships with these other trans-identified women, some of them have been through horrible trauma, but some of them had just easy lives. I mean, I have not had trauma in my life. That's not what drove me to identify as trans. And I think sometimes we rush to go, oh, it's because of all these mental health conditions. And I'm I think sometimes it's just wanting attention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or just that so resonates with me too. I remember which was probably, I would say 2014, 2015 in this theater company I was in, when people were saying, because while I was in that theater company, we did a shift from LGBTQIA, there was 2 P's in there at one point. I don't know. We switched that acronym up, and it was really important that you weren't using the old acronym, because now that's really offensive. And someone suggested in the group, why are we dealing with all of these letters? We should all just be calling each other queer. And I remember thinking, but I'm not sure I verbalized this, that I was if you think that we should all just be called queer, you've never been called queer. I knew that I had never been called queer as a slur. And so I was I probably feel if I think that being called queer is fun and quirky and cool and makes me feel good, that's probably just because I have never been called it as a slur. And that was like the whole group. The whole group was like, yeah, let's all be queer.
I know it's definitely something I fell into, where it's like role-playing oppression and how much danger you're in. And, you know, I've been called a slur, but it's things that aren't slurs, or, you know.
Well, the Oppression Olympics is something that I think trans activism is very engaged in, and they not only do they play the biggest victims and accuse, but they actually victimize women. I mean, it's a misogynistic ideology. They don't like women who know and are willing to say that women are adult human females. And they literally will argue, like in my town, they literally argue in the mainstream media that woman, adult human female is hate speech. And it's about hating trans women, you know, so it's about hating men. And which forever feminists have been accused of hating men. And what is that word that they use? Misandry, you know, which is just like, no, none of this is true, you know, like, I mean, I think women knowing that we're female and that that's socially significant under patriarchy is probably, for whatever reason, it's like just the most threatening thing in the world to these men, for us to think that, you know. I just want to point out that Joey wrote, the performing arts and writing groups are all about rewriting history, and by doing that, recreating the narrative to center ambiguity and the male gaze and lens. Exactly. Yeah, like this whole thing is just a justification for reinforcing patriarchy and misogyny in an extreme way that's sterilizing people. Yeah. It's just so like obviously so homophobic. I don't know, Elizabeth, you've come a long way since 2019, right? Like, let's just skip to 2019. And what happened so that you decided that you weren't trans anymore?
Yeah, so I found, well, I guess backing up a little bit, in 2018, it was my senior year, and I started looking at various turfy Facebook groups. I was still subscribed to Pink News on Facebook, and I remember seeing some TERFs. I won't say her last name because I don't know if she'll think this is doxing her or something. But one named Donna, who was always commenting in the Pink News comments,
okay,
just making scathing remarks about how ridiculous it was. And just from there, I would start to friend people and join Facebook groups and whatnot. And by 2019, it had gotten to the point that I was looking at gender critical Reddit. I miss a lot.
All right, girl.
But I remember one of the first posts I found there was a picture of Posey Parker, and it had her adult human female billboard, which
right on
summer before. And something just clicked with that. So I guess backing up again, I have obsessive compulsive disorder. So I will fixate on things and just keep turning them over in my mind. And that's how I spent 7 years basically examining like every feeling, or, you know, when I finally cut my hair short, like I was terrified to do that because I thought if I liked it too much, that meant I was a man. Or like, I don't know, wearing men's deodorant because I think it works better and it's cheaper. Like that's the impacts in action. That doesn't mean I'm non-binary. So I just spent all this time examining every feeling that I had. You know, am I a man? Am I non-binary? Am I actually a woman after all? And then I saw her billboard, and it just kind of fell into place that it doesn't really matter like how you feel about the body that you're in. It's still the body that you're in. And I am a woman, and I may be offbeat in some ways, but that doesn't make me anything other than what my sex is. And it was like, I don't know, I want to say within a matter of days, no more than 2 weeks, like it had resolved itself.
Wow. So amazing. That is amazing after 7 years of pretty much staunchly believing in it, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Just-
how would you say like your understanding of your OCD or your relationship or like how you manage your OCD has changed since that change happened?
I think I'm better able to recognize now that it is irrational because I mean, I wasted I mean, it wasn't a total waste because I do think I learned a lot from the experience, but I just spent so many years of my life stuck in that delusion. And so now if I'm getting stuck in a similar way, I'll just be like, it's just a thought. Go and do something and don't fixate on it. Just go for a walk or something.
Interesting. That sounds good. Here,
That's
I
awesome.
want to put up Joey Bright's question for you. She wants to know, Elizabeth, if you were exposed to feminism earlier or during your years in the 7-year phase.
Yeah. So, I was a big reader as a kid, and I remember something that I would read about was early women's rights. I mean, it was just like picture books and stuff, but I would say I knew what the suffragettes were when I was maybe 8 or so. And just reading about them and about other women who fought so hard to get to where they wanted to be in their careers and whatnot. So I was exposed to that, and I think that was something that was always in the back of my mind, that here are these women who are in sex atypical roles, and they, maybe felt that they should have been born a man, historical writings and whatnot that we have about, if only I'd been my father's son and not his daughter, and then I would have all these opportunities. And it was just always in the back of my mind that, okay, they made it as women. So maybe I felt like there was something off about trans and needing to be non-binary.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so interesting.
But when did that doubt didn't happen though until you saw the adult human female?
No, it was always in the background.
It was always in the background. You always had a doubt.
I always had major
all
doubts.
at once.
The unfortunate part, they will tell you that's internalized transphobia. And I'm like, no, that's thinking for yourself and having even like a tiny amount of historical knowledge.
Who's they, Elizabeth? Who's they? Is it your former friends, or was it like a trans advocacy organization?
My friends and just the LGBTQIAP+2 XYZ, whatever, that whole culture.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yes, it is. It's a culture.
Yeah.
It's a social virus. It's everywhere. It's in the churches. It's in the public schools. It's everywhere. I mean, it's in the so-called radical leftist community. I mean, I don't know, like, there's a rare place in our society besides within radical feminism and lesbian feminism that there are gender critical ideas and spaces and thoughts being exchanged. And so it's really great to have you here and that you are brave and able to speak about this. So anyway, so it was just in the culture. It was at your school, your college. Was it in your high school as well then? Yeah, you were identifying as trans in high school. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was homeschooled actually. So I was on the internet a lot, honestly, probably more than I should have been. I don't know. I don't really fault my parents for that though, because they tried to put restrictions on how much time my brother and I could be online, and we'd go around that.
What did your parents think? Like, were they accepting when you identified that way?
So I have a bit of an atypical experience as a desister. So I was not like out as trans. I told one person during that whole time. I kept it to myself because I don't know. I guess I like to be sure about things before I make great big decisions. And so I joke now that I procrastinated until I procrastinated my dysphoria until it resolved. But where was I going with this? I just lost my train of thought.
That's all right. It happens to me all the time.
I don't know
What
where.
were you asking? I was asking you about your parents, how you
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So it was. They didn't actually learn about this until after the fact. But I'm.
Oh, wow. For 7 years, you hid it from them.
Yeah, I hid
Did
it.
you have teachers at school that were calling you your trans name or whatever? And
No.
oh, you didn't. Okay.
No, I had a name picked out, but I never got the courage.
But were you like, was this something where like on Tumblr people would like call you your preferred name and like online you had your people who did know, or was this only like you were participating in this, or yeah, I'm curious.
I had one friend who knew that I was having doubts. Yeah. So
Was
I do have the
friend or an online friend or both?
online friend. Yeah, and I've actually never met her, and sometimes
So you were a closeted trans.
yeah.
Yeah, that's so
Oh my God.
See, I think that
That's
is like
really...
what is so fascinating about this ideology, right? Because you're so into it, but it's like, where is it happening? You know, like it's happening in our minds and it's happening online. Like I feel like I mean, I had more in person because I was in this theater company in person, but so much of it was all just stuff going on in my head that I was like interpreting these messages from Tumblr and a little bit from people in person, and then going home and being like, gosh, I guess I should never make a joke about not liking dick anymore. Otherwise, like I'm going to be in big trouble. Big trouble with who? You know, like.
Well, it's about mind control.
Yeah,
this is about mind control.
Yeah, I agree.
No, I'm relieved that I never did come out, because just listening to people's stories and hearing them talk about the absolute shit that they put their parents through, especially, I'm really glad that I don't have to go back and be like, yeah, actually, I was wrong about that. I mean, I'm not saying that I won't admit I was wrong, but just like the idea of having to go back and be like, actually, that was a stupid idea, and I was a child who didn't know any better. And I'm just thinking back on all the friends who like imploded family relationships. You know, like their grandparents wouldn't go with the chosen name, and they imploded that relationship, and their grandparents died, and the relationship was in pieces. And I'm just thinking, I'm so glad I never did anything like that.
Yeah, there's so many people I think that blow up their whole family dynamic over this issue. I'm lucky. I didn't blow up my whole family's dynamic, but I did have to go back to them and be like, I want to be called Emily again. Don't call me that weird name anymore, please. And it was fucking I mean, it was awkward when I told them I wanted to be called by a different name, and it was awkward when I told them I didn't want to be called by a different name anymore, you know? Like, it was all... But now both of my parents are big TERFs.
Yeah, my parents don't believe in this either.
Aw, so
actually, I'm going to tell them.
I've got a question over here from Joey again. She'd like to know if you were exposed to pornography when you were online as a child.
Yeah, I was.
And do you think that impacted your identification as trans?
Yes and no. I don't think it's what drove me to being trans, but it was definitely something that, okay, this is embarrassing. I would watch it and try to figure out like who in a scene I wanted to be, because I thought that would determine my gender.
I don't think you're alone in that. I think that's like pretty common amongst that. I mean, I really believe that like the explosion of, you know, transbians or whatever, it's all these dudes who are watching lesbian pornography from a very young age. I mean, they're conditioning themselves. If you're watching pornography and you are masturbating, you are conditioning your brain to be aroused by the material that you're masturbating to. And that's what they do. And it just conditions your brain to be like, yeah, I want to be that, which is not even very different than our entire cultural experience of like going to a movie and being like, I want to be a superhero. I want to be, you know, Elle Woods. Like, I want to be the star of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very narcissistic philosophy, and I think it just makes a lot of sense that it sprung up in America, right? Didn't this shit get invented over here, or no? Was it the white French postmodern philosophers I don't know who.
I mean, it's definitely like white, medical dudes who created transgenderism, as in like, I can change your body to match your mind or whatever. That was definitely like white men who were just experimenting on other white men, basically. From all the case studies that I'm familiar with, it was all white male doctors operating on white male transsexuals.
Yeah, I feel like
Or
definitely
gay men, really. They were all good. The early ones were all gay men.
Yeah, I feel like definitely the marketing of trans couldn't really have happened anywhere other than the US.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're so right.
Just this idea that if you're dissatisfied with who you are, just go out and buy another you.
So getting back to what feminism means to you, and when you were exposed to feminism and maybe different types of feminism, and can you talk about that and how feminism and feminist friendships maybe have influenced you in your life beyond trans now?
Life beyond trans. I would say that one thing that's, and this is something that I think has interested me since I was a child, but just reading about women in the past and the lives that they lived, and especially since college, that's something I've done a lot. And there's just so much wisdom to be gained from reading about, what the suffragettes went through. Like, I've been reading, what's her name? Emmeline Pankhurst's autobiography and whatnot, or Mary Wollstonecraft, and just realizing that you're not the first person who's had these feelings, and you won't be the last. The trans movement is just, it's so solipsistic, and it's like at some point.
Wait, I don't know what that word means. Can you define that? I've never heard that word before.
Here. Let's see. I feel like the internet will do a better job.
It refers to itself, right?
They're so focused on their own wants and needs that they don't think about other people at all.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
And like, I feel like that kind of overlaps with narcissism, but some of it is just like a complete lack of knowledge about other people. And I feel like at some point it's like our responsibility to pull our heads out of our asses and get curious about other people and about the world. And it's like, okay, well, here are all these historical writings about, women who felt that they didn't fit in, and women who were the first to do this, and women who speak about their fathers saying you should have been born a boy, and I regret never having a son. And you can just learn so much from them. But I feel like this whole LGBTQ XYZ culture is not interested in any history that happened before like 2010.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then that leads me to feminist friendships. Just, I've always vibed with, I would say Gen X or above. Like, most of my friends are Gen Xers or boomers. I was that weird kid. I was that weird student in college who liked going to office hours and hearing about, like, I don't know what projects my professors had going on. But it just really helps to listen to these women talk about their lives and their struggles, and you've
got a very woman-centered feminism.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're researching women's lives, learning women's history, listening to women, and that's a very woman-centered feminism.
Just finding the strength and examples from women from your own life.
Mm.
And the strength.
You feel you had some strong female role models in your life growing up?
Yeah, I would say my mom was a big one. She's just always done her own thing, and she's not really girly. I wouldn't say she's really masculine either, but just that was another thing that I kept coming back to, that my mom, she's happy to get dressed up fancy for a nice occasion, but she loves math and science. She has a shelf of textbooks about like this big of physics books. She's always out there digging in the garden, and just like she's just she's interested in everything. And that doesn't make her non-binary. That just makes her a mom. And so I could never, I couldn't pigeonhole her as a gender identity. She just was. And it was something.
Well, now you know that gender identity is, nobody has a gender identity. Just made up bullshit to keep.
When you're stuck in the mind frame, you think everyone has a gender identity,
Right.
and so you waste time trying to think like, okay, what's her gender identity?
What a waste of time. It's such a waste of time. We're so glad you're here with us, Elizabeth. It was such a pleasure to meet you at Sisters for Sisters here in Madison, and to just, I don't know, see how you present and how thoughtful you are. And so thanks for coming on to WLRN's channel today. And do you have some other questions we could look at that?
I actually wanted to swing back to your relationship with your parents. I'm curious, like, how you said after the fact you told them, and like, how has your, like, I also, like, I know what it's like to be like a young person who's like doing more on the internet than your parents know about and like hiding that or whatever. And like, do you have a more like forthright relationship? Like, have you told them about like, hey, maybe you should have restricted my internet a little more? Like, I've never had that conversation with my parents.
Yeah, I think we're closer. I haven't had that conversation with them just because I don't know. I feel like there's no point.
Yeah.
I mean, what happened, and I think also it's just so different from when they were growing up. We're growing up with the internet, and I think people don't always realize that, basically like sending your kids down a dark alley to play with random people.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like that because it feels like they're just in their bedrooms, not leaving the house.
Mm-hmm.
So they were doing the best they could. So I wouldn't hold that against them at all.
Yeah, I feel pretty similarly. I mean, I think like, I think parents are just like naive, about how quickly, how fast on the internet you can get really bad stuff.
Yeah, I feel like it's a social virus that's spread through the internet. And we've got Joey Bright here still, and I know that she has a lot to say about the role of technology and just where we're headed with AI and all of this stuff, and how it's related to the disembodiment that transgenderism promotes. You're not your body, you are your identity in your mind. And that detachment of the body from the self is a preparation for what's to come in the future with all these technologies. And it's so dystopian, of course people feel dysphoric, like, I don't know, like, I think we're animals, we're creatures on the planet, and we feel things, and climate change it's irritating us, it's bothering us, as it is a lot of the animals and plants and things that you see stressed out there due to climate change. And there's the social climate too. And this transgender thing, the ideology that's spread far and wide in our society, I think it's really irritating us. I think it's really agitating us and getting us to lose our sense of humor, to lose what it means to be human. It's very dehumanizing to separate the mind from the body. No, I don't want to separate the mind from the body. I am my body. We are our bodies. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, hell yeah. I agree with that. It's definitely, I don't know, it makes me think about like this episode of the X-Files where like this like tech dude uploads his brain into his computer, and then at the end of the episode it's like his consciousness is living on the internet, and he lives, and it's like his body is dead but his mind is on the internet. And I was just like, I don't buy that, like, and I think that idea people have, like, it's one thing to watch it in TV and movies and stuff as a sci-fi idea, but we're in this world where, like, kind of in like the post Star Trek world where the sci-fi informs the real life technology. people are running with this idea that that you could download your brain into a different body, basically. Like,
I just don't understand why that is even appealing to anyone. It's like, do you hate your body? Well, yeah, the answer is yes. This is a body hating society, especially a woman body hating, female body hating society. But yeah, our whole society.
Well, and like an aging thing, a lot of the times in movies, what is happening is like I watched part of a sci-fi movie the other day that I can't remember what it was called. It had like Ben Kingsley and like maybe like Ryan Reynolds, but it was like an old billionaire who was ill, and they were like, "Hey, you've got all that money. We can take your brain and put it in this young man's body." And then of course it's like the young man's memories start resurfacing, and he's like, "Where'd this body come from?" And the dude's like, "I don't know, dude. Where the hell do you think we were getting these bodies? You know, like."
And I feel like especially with the young women, there's a fear of growing older and just a hatred of older women with more experience and more knowledge. I mean, I know we talk a lot about the men who show up at our events and scream at us, but there's a lot of young women pushing this.
Absolutely.
And I mean, yeah, it's like a compounded thing, because it's like, youth question, just by being youth, we question our identity. That's a part of the development of the self, you know what I mean? And then the other thing that's compounding the situation is that this generation is growing up with the internet. You know, I don't think that the social virus could have spread as much as it has if it weren't for social media and the internet.
Yeah,
you know?
I totally agree.
I don't think any of this would have ever happened to me if it hadn't been for the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. We need to get on to women's land, right? I think Pinwheel's talking about that. She's like, here she says, we need women's community back. We need to trust women again. Yeah, totally.
We need to trust. The younger generations need to trust the older generations when they say, like, it's a phase. You're not going to feel this way forever. You'll grow out of it.
Right.
Like, puberty is really rough, but when you're going through it, like, you don't have the life experience to look back and know that it's going to end. You're in the middle of it, and you're like, oh my God, the world is falling apart. Right. And it's like, you'll grow out of it, and you'll settle down. And you'll feel better. And I don't feel that you get the chance to settle into yourself if you've cut body parts off.
Right. Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, stop. Yeah. And stop persecuting women and parents who are saying no to this, and calling us haters, you know, and I mean,
well, especially when, like, the thing that I think is really scary as far as like looking to the future is all of the people now who during their adolescence were on puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones that has a very real effect on your brain development. And it's going to make a lot of challenges for these people, I think, going forward and maturing into adulthood. They're going to have a lot of challenges that people who weren't on cross-sex hormones during their teenage years just will have no concept of understanding of like how their brain is working differently. And
which is unfortunately, I think, going to be an industry all its own. Like, therapy and the medical treatment and whatnot set up to support these people who are realizing that their lives have just been blasted to smithereens.
I mean, it's really destroying.
There's not enough support. There's like no support.
It's destroying society to create these victims like this and worship the narcissism of it. And
there was nothing wrong with them. I mean, you know, maybe we were all a little turned around in our heads, but like physically we were fine. And in terms of our minds, like, it's nothing that you can't sort out.
Right. And you know,
you cannot go back. No, they cannot go back.
Yeah. Right. When celebrities are worshipped and cutting their bodies up, what are kids supposed to think? And see if they're getting this on the, I mean,
but it's also so like it's so normalized, I think, in mainstream society at this point. Like I feel like a decade ago, 15 years ago, there was more sort of like generalized like shame around plastic surgery of sort of like, oh, that's something you don't want people to know that you've been doing. And it's like very different now. Like obviously there are still people who like, especially like, you know, celebrities like the Kardashians that are still like, no, baby, it's all natural. And everyone's like, who are you kidding? We know what humans look like. We know they don't look like you guys. Like, we know. But it's also, on the other hand, like sort of this like switch from celebrity culture to like influencer, like real people TikTok culture. I think it's like very cool to be like, yeah, I went and got filler today. Yeah, I went and did this procedure, like, because it's for me and my self-esteem. I've always felt insecure about this thing. So I'm
It's
doing
empowering.
it for me. It's like,
Yeah.
I watched a reality show where there was a guy who had like a crazy amount of plastic surgery in all in one fell swoop, and talked extensively about how he was like, I was always the fat kid growing up and I got made fun of and I have all this pain. So doing this like total body sculpting where I'm going to go in as sort of like you know, a dad bod and come out with a 6-pack abs, like this is healing for me. And it's like,
No, it's not, because wherever you go, there you are. Like
Yes.
he's still the same mentally.
Exactly.
Like
And there's no, you know, if you put implants into your abs to make it look like you have washboard abs, but you can't do 50 crunches, like you're still gonna be exactly like you said in that mental turmoil of like, everyone thinks I'm that ugly fat kid I was when I was 12 years old. Like, it's so
Because
depressing.
it's not really about the fat; it's about the shame that he has.
And this is
Right.
all just the same misogynistic crap that's been around for so long in the like fashion magazines and so-called women's journals and whatnot. You know, someone here is writing mommy makeovers promoted on billboards on the side of the highway. It's like, yeah, you know, like it's all just about women needing to try to like sculpt themselves and fit into this stereotypical
If they
image.
don't fit in, they think, oh, I should be a man then.
Right.
Like that would be easier.
Right.
Like people don't want to be fat, ugly women. And so they're like, I'll just be a non-binary gay trans man. And I'm like, you've just put yourself in a different box.
Right.
And they don't see that yet, but at some point they're going to wake up.
I hope so. I mean, it's like we've been on this planet for a long time before this ideology and the internet took hold. You want to believe that deep in our cellular, physical, material beings, like there's some kind of survival instinct and that we will snap out of this. You know, you just want to believe that. But I don't know. I see a lot of evidence for the power of the patriarchal mind and for people to be susceptible, extremely susceptible to mind control, you know? It seems to be working, but
I mean, I think it's so similar to like the you know, misogynistic enslavement of women's own minds, where like you are your own oppressor because you are the one monitoring, you know, like you have the patriarchy inside your mind monitoring you. It's like the same, like you talked about with trans, that it's like this internal thing that you're constantly like I remember sitting in theater class, like in rehearsal, when we would go around and do pronouns and there would be someone new and they would be like, oh, my pronouns, female pronouns. And I would be like, oh, that's wrong. I
was the same way.
It's like,
instead of like hyper obsessively monitoring to make sure you're like the right kind of woman, now you're like hyper obsessing over your feelings, and you're like, well, do I feel non-binary today? Like my best friend, ex-best friend, we haven't spoken since 2020 because she thinks I'm a hateful person. She would get all bent out of joint if she got dressed for the day, and then like by the afternoon she like switched and was feeling more masked, but she'd got dressed in something girlier, and now I look back on it and I'm just like, oh my god, I cannot believe the drama that she put us all through because of this. I'm like, it's not that deep.
Right. Or like you're misdirecting your feeling. Like, I don't know. Yeah, maybe when you wake up in the morning, you're like, I'm feeling ready for the day. I feel cute. I'm going to put on my makeup and my cute skirt. And then after a day of like misogynistic, phrases, things being said to you, men looking at you weird, or just like, I worked a long day and now I'm like sweaty and my makeup is running and like, I don't feel cute and pretty anymore. Like, I want to go home and take a shower. That doesn't mean that like now I am a different gender or whatever. Like now I'm in this different identity.
Yeah, it's just a human experience.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah, God, it's so fascinating when I think back to like just so many of the conversations that I had with people at that time about this stuff, about like, I don't know, like there weren't any in the theater group that I was in. It was women. There was one woman that identified as a trans man, and there was one man that identified as non-binary. And then like I started identifying as non-binary, and I think like a few other women started, but there weren't any like trans women. And like when it was like so much talk of like trans women are women, yes. And then when we actually had a trans women, we did like this special project where we invited a bunch of trans women to like make this video. That was a moment that I remember it being like, oh no, we lost her.
Oh no,
something happened. We're having a technical difficulty.
Oh, come back, Elizabeth. Thanks for staying tuned. We will try to get a hold of Elizabeth and get her back on. But Emily, you were talking about in this theater group. What were you were talking about
just like how different things were when there was actual
trans women there,
real like because the men who were there previously were like theater gays. Theater gays are very different from so-called like lesbian trans women who have a very different energy. That's what I remember is the energy, and not being able to talk about that, how it was just very like, yep, these are the women that blah 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 we're so connected to. And yeah, that was, I don't know, I agree with like what she was saying, it's slowly and then all at once, like it's this thing in the back of your mind the whole time of like, does this make sense? And then all of a sudden one thing happens and then you're like, yeah, this does not make sense. I wish I don't know that I really had a moment like that, like a real definitive moment where I was like, I don't know, right before I peaked, or like around when I was peaking, when I left Portland and I was working on a farm. Oh my God, this is so cringe. The first day on this farm, there was a guy, one of the other guys who was a volunteer as like a, vegetable harvester or whatever we were doing, showed up in a tank top that said gender is over. And he had like earrings and maybe like lipstick or something like that. And I remember being like, cool tank top or whatever. And he was like, yeah. And then he told me all about how he had just like started identifying as a woman basically. And how he was all new and so exciting and da, da, da. And it was really like, it was a month. I was there for a month. And this dude would show up to harvest vegetables at 7 a.m. wearing like a bra, and not like a sports bra, but like a lace, like a push-up bra, or like, and he didn't have anything. He wasn't on hormones and stuff. And me, the woman, I never wore a bra. I had stopped wearing bras by that point. And it was so, none of the women were wearing makeup. None of the women were wearing earrings. None of the women were performing femininity when we were going out into the field to like harvest vegetables and do labor. Except this man who was like, I now identify as a woman. He was still performing femininity while, taking like shoveling chicken shit and stuff like that. And it was like, that I think that experience really
helped pique you.
I mean, I was already right there, and then I was like, "You're stupid. This is stupid. Like, if you want to put on earrings at home when you're having dinner with your girlfriend because it makes you feel pretty, whatever. But like, why are you wearing like fancy dangly earrings out here in this 85-degree heat and humidity while we're like, I don't know, it's just I think that, not that I hadn't already like rejected a lot of parts of femininity, but that really drove it home for me. The absurdity of femininity, of like performing femininity when in situations where it's like you're getting dirty, you're getting your hands, you're digging in the dirt with your hands, like, you know, you can't.
Oh, here she is. She's back. She has spotty internet. So let me get Elizabeth back for us. And then thank you, Emily, for filling us in on that story of a trans woman or a man who identified as trans and performed femininity while doing farm chores.
Yeah.
So that was what we were talking about. But Joey has another question for you. How does it feel to have found some TERFs in real life?
It feels like a relief because I felt so alone for so long. I mean, I thought I was the only one who ever had any thoughts like this at all. Although I guess that's not specific to TERFs. That's more of like a detransition or a desister thing. But, you know, I also wasn't the only one who had doubts about the movement, about the trans movement. And it just showed me that I wasn't crazy. I mean,
awesome.
7 years.
I remember on your Facebook page when your memories came up, because you had some really great pictures from Sisters for Sisters. And I remember you writing that it was like one of the best feelings that you'd had all year or something. And it just made me feel so good to see that.
Yeah, I think it was the day I gave my talk, actually. It was like probably one of the best days I had last year. Yeah.
Nice. Great. And so that brings me to you're going to be a speaker at WDI USA's event, their national conference in San Francisco, coming up September 15th through 17th, I think that is. And then you're also going to be a speaker at Sovereign Women Speak out in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
So do you enjoy public speaking?
Yes and no. I don't know. It stresses me out a little, but I'm in the end, I'm always glad that I did it. So, and some of it is about meeting people too, like people for me, and after I speak, and we end up talking, and we end up becoming good friends. So that's always nice.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you've got fans, but then also the feminist movement. I think the feminist movement is about making those female friendships, you know, and not. We can fangirl on each other and lift each other up. Every woman a cis star, you know. I think each woman has a way of shining in our movement, and we should really lift each other up. But beyond that, I think that female friendship that gets made at these conferences, you know, that relationship between women is so important for our feminist movement, you know. And so it's cool you're going to go to those two conferences and be a speaker. And yeah, and you know, thanks for being out. I also wanted to talk about, it's interesting how you were closeted trans, and I just want to talk about the difference between transitioning, detransitioning, and desisting. Like, what does it mean to transition? Because I've heard you don't have to have medical treatments in order to be trans. So then can't you, if you haven't had medical treatments, can't you be detrans if you were trans even without the medical treatments? So I'm just confused, and I think part of that confusion is by design, right? And so like the category detransitioning versus desister, like it's dependent on this category of trans that is extremely ambiguous if you don't have to go through medical. You know what I'm saying? So can you just talk about that for a second?
Yeah, because I mean, trans can really mean so many different things, and the they'll tell you that it's all valid, which is a word that I hate now. But this idea that you can have, maybe only changed your name and your pronouns, and you're just as much of a trans man as someone who's gone all the way with the surgeries, the testosterone, the mastectomy, the hysterectomy, the phalloplasty. Like, they're viewed as equivalent, which doesn't actually make sense, because words have meanings and they need to have agreed upon shared meanings. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it does confuse a lot of people, and we're all just supposed to accept that it's just everyone's individual journey, which I think is just bullshit.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then
Arcana,
yeah.
I mean, even Arcana Mystery, who earlier was asking what's a TERF, it's like, is TERF an identity too? It's like, no, we don't need these identities. We just are human beings, and some of us are female, some of us are male. Like, why do we have to have all these labels and identities? I'm so done with it,
Mm-hmm. I mean, they'll call us TERFs even if we're really not. That's just
there is no such thing as a TERF.
Yeah.
Because there's no such thing as trans, it's like, how can we be trans? I mean,
well,
maybe
and also we're not trans exclusionary, we're male exclusionary.
Right, because women who identify as trans are included in our radical feminist analysis, and that we see them as female, I mean, it's just a big twisted thing. It's like, I don't understand why.
I mean, I think it's designed, like we were saying, like, it's by design. Like, I think because what the ideology really does is it makes everyone be like, you're stupid and you should feel stupid and wrong.
Yes.
And be quiet and listen to someone who has the authority. Listen to that authority figure.
It's so authoritarian. This ideology is so authoritarian.
I definitely feel that. There were so many moments in those years where I felt like there was something I was not understanding and I was the stupid one. And the thing was, I studied gender studies in college, and I felt like maybe I shouldn't be there. But like, I remember one thing that confused me. I felt like there was something I was like not understanding about trans women and their womanhood. And now I'm like, well, no shit, because they're guys with a fetish, or they're self-hating gay men.
Yeah.
And so the reason that I'm not connecting with them when they talk about what womanhood means to them, it's because they're not women. It's not that I'm stupid.
Right.
But I think we're encouraged to
any
doubt
ideology
ourselves.
that's going to call people stupid for listening to their instincts and what they see before their very eyes is a horrible ideology to teach anybody, and especially women who already are so self-doubting anyway. And so it's all about controlling us, and we won't be controlled. You, me, Elizabeth, and Emily, we're not going to be controlled. A lot of the women who are tuning into this program right now are not controlled. We are free, liberated women, and we think for ourselves, and we have opinions, and we're not hateful. We are woman-centered, and we love women, and that's a fine thing to do in a patriarchy. It's a medicine for the hatred of women, is to love women. So I'm going to ask if you have any final things you'd like to say, Elizabeth, and just thank you for your time and for being on our show. And the podcast will come out on August 3rd, an edited version of this conversation. And I just wanted also to thank all of our online audience. And if you could kick down a little bit to WLRN, I've got, our website up there right now on the screen. We are a totally volunteer powered community radio station in the Femisphere. And so thank you so much, Elizabeth. Any final thing that you'd like to share with our listeners?
I guess what I want to share, just something I've been thinking about lately. This past, I don't know, maybe year and a half, but I just wake up every day really grateful that I didn't transition, because I didn't want to be a mother until I hit 25. And now that's all I want. And I'm just looking around at the friends that I have and the friends that I had. We don't talk anymore, but I will check up on them, I don't know, a couple times a year. And some of them have
they've been on hormones long enough to sterilize themselves, or they've cut their breasts off, and it's going to be really difficult for them when they wake up and they realize that, I mean, not everyone wants kids, but some people are sure they don't, and then it changes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something that they can get back.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I wake up every day like, how the hell did I get through those 7 years? And I'm like, I'm okay. Like, I actually learned a lot from this experience. How did I get to be so lucky? Because a lot of people aren't going to make it through this unscathed.
Right. So that's why it's so important that you speak out and you feel that empathy and that solidarity with other women who have fallen prey to this ideology. And so we thank you for your presence, for your work.
Thanks.
I'm excited to see how you infuse our movement in the future with work that you're doing and your speaking engagements and everything. So thanks again, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.